Hello, good morning. Welcome to the Dailies on Echo Television, where we keep you updated with all that is happening on the paper, where we have some of the stories such as Mele Kyari have said that in the next 2 weeks, the refinery in Port Harcourt will kick off and start working. And there also we're seeing regarding the kidnapping of the over 200 students that were being kidnapped in Kaduna. We're saying that the terrorists have said that the government should pay 1 billion naira. We will recall that earlier on they said 40 trillion naira, and the amount have been dropped to 1 billion naira, which they are giving the government 20 days starting from the day these children were being kidnapped. I'm Salah Shidasho, and I'll be doing the program with Rachel Tanzi. Good morning.
Morning, Salah.
How you doing?
I'm fine. How about you?
I'm happy it's Friday.
It's Friday.
Yeah. All right, our viewers, please do remember you can be part of the conversation. Drop your comment, your view, your opinion on our Facebook and YouTube handle. And we shall go straight into the paper, starting with the Daily Independent newspaper.
And the big story on the paper, Port Harcourt refinery to start operation in 2 weeks. Statement from Mele Kyari. You can start with the details on the front page. Tinubu asks National Assembly to repeal reenact student loans law. Senate reps to relocate to main chambers next month after 2 years. You can start with the details on the front page. 147 persons killed in Benue by herdsmen in 2 months, says MUT. Asks Sultan to apologize to thief for calling them cattle thieves. Tinubu relocates NACA to Health Ministry, names Temitope Ilori as DG, upgrades Federal College of Dental Technology to Varsity. Details can be found on page 7. Confusion as EFCC names ex-Kogi governor in amended corruption allegations perpetrated before he became governor. Constitution review, help us weed out analog laws, Akpabio tells NBA, urges body to flush out quacks from ranks. Details can be found on page 6. Nigerian troops killed 213 terrorists, nabbed 283 others. Details can be found on page 6. Tinubu appoints Dennis Otwaro administrator of Presidential Amnesty Program. Another big story on the paper says, despite threat to kill 286 Kaduna pupils, Staff Defense Headquarters vows to rescue them, admits hostages being held in location difficult to get to. At the downside of the paper, Makinde announces passage of Olubadan. Details can be found on page 2, and that's all the news on Daily Independent.
On the Voice of Liberty newspaper, alleged budget padding, we are saying that step down immediately, PDP tells Sapabio. We saw that from yesterday paper. Also, on the alleged, talking about alleged 84 billion naira money laundering, EFCC files charges against Yahya Bello and others. More detail can be found inside the paper. Federal government to spend 178.9 billion naira on Tinubu's tragedy agenda. More detail of it in the paper. And on the Kaduna school abduction, kidnappers demand 1 billion naira ransom, threatening to kill students in 20 days. Kidnappers of the Kaduna school children have contacted a spokesman for the families of the hostages, demanding a total of 1 billion naira for their release. More detail can be found inside the paper. On the sea cable damage causes internet outrage in Nigeria, telcos and banks hit. No wonder we've been saying that the network have been a little bit fluctuating. So more detail, you want to know why, you can read more of that inside the paper. Federal government slammed terrorism charge against Miati Allah President Bodejo. You can find that in the paper. Fresh abduction in Kaduna, signed that immunity reign. This is coming from Amnesty International. Fresh abduction in Kaduna, signed that impunity reigns, coming from Amnesty International. We also saw that yesterday. Also, we're seeing Ramalan pays tribute to the late elder statesman Abbas Dabo Sambo. More detail found in the paper, and that's all on the Voice of Liberty.
On the Daily Times newspaper, CBN bars banks from profiting from forex revaluation. You can start with the details on the front page. Amendment of student loan scheme as kills second reading. Port Harcourt refinery to start production in 2 weeks, coming from Kyari. First Lady calls for stiffer penalty for kidnappers. The big story on the paper, Article 6, probe of alleged 3.7 trillion naira budget padding. It's fake allegation, a statement from the Senate. EFCC names ex-Kogi Governor Yahaya Bello in alleged diversion of 100 billion naira. At the downside of the paper, NGX index closes positive as investors gain 27.64 billion naira. We are seeing that it has been in a bullish season for quite a while now. And that's all the news on the Daily Times newspaper.
On the Guardian newspaper, we are having the story on Japa or modern slavery. How UK visa system, we have deportation, risk silence, exploited care workers. And I think we can see a picture story actually showing how some of these health workers are being silent and being afraid because some of them are going through either sexual molestation, abuses, and all of that from their employers. So you can find more detail of that big story on page 4 and 5. And Rachel will be talking about some of our care workers that are leaving, even though basically most of those are those who are working for maybe the elderly and all of that. And then most of them, before you actually start working, you need more like a visa sponsor, which happens to be your employer. And we're seeing that a number of them are complaining of exploitation, sexual harassment, either from their workers, their landlords, because most times the houses where you live is being secured for you by your employer. And so sometimes they have nobody to run to. And we're saying that, I think, was it early this year or last year, we're looking at the total of visas that were being issued to care workers that had lived. We're talking about over 100,000 visas have been issued. So I think in as much as, I think to some extent they take advantage of the fact that some of these workers are desperate to leave the shores of the country. They are looking for in search of a greener pasture, but sometimes it always doesn't look green when you get close until you get there. So I think we have to be careful, even though you really cannot tell. But I think there should be a union or something where you can actually get to table some of these issues they're going through, and then it will be picked up from there. But I really think something needs to be done because it's really, really getting out of hand, and that is why it has even got into the paper this morning.
As far as I'm concerned, it is modern slavery. Either way, even if you are not being exploited, even if you are well employed and you are not among the demographic that are going through this thing, it's still modern slavery. It's modern slavery because our leaders have failed us. So we are still left in the hands of people that once enslaved us. And it's modern in the sense that we're supposed to have everything within our country. We are supposed to have no reason whatsoever to leave Nigeria except for vacation and just chilling and taking time out and things like that. But any system that you see people leaving so quick is a failed one, whether we like it or not, whether we admit it, where people are running out of it. And it enslaves people because whether we like it or not, there are people who will be lucky to fall in the right hands, but they are few compared to the majority that are not finding it easy. Is Japa wrong? No, it's absolutely not wrong. It's normal, it's okay, it's right. It's how the world operates and moves. There's nothing wrong with changing your location for school, for work, for relationship. There's nothing wrong with moving and living to one place. The problem is doing it wrong. And I believe that this is where people are getting it wrong. The desperation of just wanting to go is leaving people inside a trouble that who will help them? Because this is a critical situation. Because who will help them? Because there's the fear of deportation. And when you're being deported, it affects your chance of traveling again.
True.
It affects your chance of traveling again. It red lists you. And tomorrow, it not only stops your chances of going to the UK, but to other countries also. That's what deportation does. So it's not just about you're being deported from the UK, for example. Tomorrow, even when you want to go to another country, such record
it's really there.
It's there. So it spoils your chances to be able to move to another country. So it automatically makes it modern slavery in different ways. However, for those who are yet to leave, because these ones now are already in this situation, and help will come their way, but it's going to take a long while before their voices is being heard, before things are being fixed. And whether we like, just as you said, the UK visa system, we see how they keep making it tight and tougher. And for those who are already there, will do whatever it takes to be able to stay, because you left there to be able to make ends meet. And when you come back here, there's still nothing waiting for you in the first place. So you left because nothing was here for you, and that was why you left over there. It's for those now going. It's not only about making sure that you get the job, the visa and everything. It's not just about being a caregiver. Make sure that you go through a channel that you are protected. It's important because this is a very sensitive job. It's just like every other health work where there are hazards involved in the job. These are some of the risks. It's a health sector job, and therefore it has its risks. So make sure that you're going through a channel that protects you. Make sure that you are not going private. I know we are tempted to go in a more private, where you work directly with your client and then you are being paid directly. It's higher because you know the caregivers talk about it. I know one or two family members that is what they do. And when you are working private, that is, you are on your own and you get to work as a private caregiver, the pay is higher. But I believe that this is also what leads to certain exploitation.
There's nobody to actually vouch for you on your own in case of anything.
But when you go through a channel, I believe, through a system, you have an employer that is allocating you to the person in need of your caregiving. You have a channel to, first of all, say you put your complaint, then you also have a channel that looks over you and will be able to watch over any exploitation and all of that. So just follow the right channel. If you're still thinking, we can't sit down here and say, don't leave. We have somebody right now at the airport about to leave the country for sure, and is going to be a caregiver elsewhere. If you're yet to and you are in your process, don't be too eager. Make sure that, you know what, the channel in which I'm going to will give me room to be protected and I'll not be exploited, because there are people out there having it smooth and easy, getting paid, not working under a harsh condition, not being exploited, not having any threat whatsoever, and yet there are people that are on the wrong side of that fence and all of that. So just do your homework very well. Don't be carried away with how good the pay is, because in the end it might look too good, but what if you go and start the job and one of the exploitation is underpayment or withholding the pay? You work extra hours and you will not be paid that extra hours, and the person might even hold your wages for a long period of time and not pay you, and then you are not helped but being left in a situation where it's almost like you're begging for your pay and all of that. So just follow the right channels and just make sure that whoever you are gaining this employment under will be of your best interest, and then will protect you.
Well, let's just hope that our caregivers will actually pay close attention to all of this.
Yeah.
Still on the Guardian newspaper, federal government seek new Student Loan Act jail term for offenders. More detail on page 7. Kaduna abductors demand 1 billion naira, threatening to kill victims. Man bag life jail term for introducing neighbor's daughter to pornography. You can find that on page 8. 2 years after accession, Olubadan joined ancestors at 82. Retire officers to sue IGP scribe over contempt of court order. Apabio threatened over Nige suspension as federal government dismisses budget pardoning claim. Internet outrage cripples business operations in Nigeria and others, and I really think this is something that needs to be looked close into, Rachel. I think this whole outrage started, well, I think was it last week or so, where all of a sudden a number of people actually thought their phone was being hacked or something just happened, because I know people who kept offing and owning, hoping that maybe something was wrong somewhere. In fact, some people said they were all actually on their way to sell their phones and all of that, because we really did not know what happened. And I really think something needs to be done concerning these telcos and banks, and then let us verify, even though I said that something happened. But I think more need to be done, because you can't keep paying for something that you do not enjoy the services well. So let's look forward to seeing what they will do, because a number of businesses were being affected by that. So we hope that they look into that and rectify whatever the problem is. IPOB rejects ranching in Southeast, urges governors to defer presidential order. More detail on page 28. And definitely we saw that come in a number of states will really not agree. This is not the first time we're having the introduction of this ranching, and a number of states have refused that. You can find more detail of that on page 28, and that's all on the Guardian newspaper.
On Nigerian Tribune, Oba Balogun Olubadan of Ibadan land joins ancestors. Lawmakers have no business with constituency projects, coming from Akintola. Federal government sets aside 100 billion naira for consumer credit in 2024 budget, coming from Bagudu. Tinubu transmits students' loan bill to reps. The big story on the paper: insecurity. NSA security chiefs, northern governors meet. Military working with foreign partners to rescue abducted citizens, coming from the defense headquarters. International undersea cables in West East Africa damaged. Internet services and banking affected. So we are seeing the reason behind the network outage. We are seeing that international undersea cables in the West and East Africa has been damaged. So I believe that something is being done to fix that and then to restore networks all around Nigeria. And I believe now we are seeing that it's not just in Nigeria, we are seeing that it's in the West and East Africa.
Yes.
You can find details on page 4. Alleged budget padding, Atiku demands immediate probe. Police recover body part of murdered Rivers DPO 6 months after. Port Harcourt refinery to begin production in 2 weeks, Kyari says 450,000 barrels of crude delivered. Crude oil production increased in Nigeria, Libya, coming from OPEC. And that's all the news on Nigerian Tribune.
On Blueprint newspaper, Tinubu to governors: it's time for governance. Let's set aside political differences. And I think the earlier they do that, the better. Detail found on page 6. Also still on the paper, FCT police DSS lack tracking equipment, coming from the wiki. So there is a need to provide them with all the tracking equipment they need, so they will be able to track people. Naira continues accession, gains 300 kobo. That is on business. You can find more of that. And on African games, South Africa overtakes Nigeria and moves to second position. Detailed on page 22. And on the Kaduna abduction, Defense Headquarters assures on rescue as abductors demand 1 billion naira ransom. They won't go scot-free. NSCDC boss vows. Troop rescue kidnapped victims, recover bodies in Taraba. More detailed inside the paper. Also, we're seeing Plateau kidney theft victim dies. Senate urges awareness on the risk, talking about the World Kidney Day that happened yesterday. We're seeing that the Plateau kidney theft victim, that is that woman, eventually died, and Senate actually urging for more awareness on the risks. And I think we spoke about that yesterday, Richard, on the fact that a number of things. So right now, with what is happening presently, Richard, this calls for whenever you're going to have an open surgery, you have to go back and scan and be sure that your organs are complete. This is how bad things have gotten presently, because this woman was not aware that that was what was being done to her. And we know the complications she was suffering after that. It was eventually later she discovered that one of her kidneys, and it was not harvested properly. That is a problem with all of these quack doctors that really
they're in a rush.
They are in a rush to it. And yesterday we made mention that every hour one kidney or a kidney is being sold at the black market.
Yeah.
So presently, as we're talking, we really cannot tell a black market somewhere there is transaction going on. So there should be more modalities being said by government into looking into all of this thing. We made mention of the fact that some of these health cares we have that you really cannot tell who licensed them, what were some of the, they meet up with all of the requirements that were needed before you can actually operate some of these hospitals, especially the private hospital, which you cannot really tell who the doctors are. And we made mention that you can't just walk into a hospital and say, let me see your certificate to be sure. And so this is really a lot of people that
And there are
victims.
forged certificates, Sally.
Exactly.
There are forged certificates. We saw that, well, some health workers, let's take it that far, nurses going to the UK with fake certificates and they were being brought back. And then that's why I keep saying there's little or nothing much you and I can do to protect ourselves, that the larger responsibility is not with the government. And this is how much the government of Nigeria keeps failing us all the time. Because I want to believe that this healthcare clinic, hospital, private, in existence, was accredited, was licensed, was approved by the government. And that is why it's existing in the first place. It was permitted to exist. So even if I walk in and I ask for your certificate, how do I know a fake and an original one? I mean, am I worried about the surgery and my and getting healed, or am I worried about the legitimacy of a certificate? And even if for some reason I'm able to say, give me the certificate, how do I know a fake, for instance, and an original one? All of these things, I'm not supposed to worry about it as a patient. I am not. Who are the people in charge of making sure that we don't have to face that kind of problem? Are the people failing us? Because it's expected that, okay, if this thing is existing, if it's allowed to exist, then it was permitted, it was licensed, it was accredited, it was, and all of that. So who, and then we just keep falling into traps because the government have failed you, because the people that are expected to work refuse to work. If not, how much can I do for myself? If I'm in the position of being a patient, am I going to worry about whether the hospital I'm going to is not a quack doctor, or the result that I'm hoping at the end of the day? What will really be on your mind as a patient at that time? Let the Nigerian government wake up, because we will never stop talking and seeing how the system keeps disappointing and disappointing every common man in the country. There's little that you and I can do for ourselves. We can play our role. We can do a little bit, but it's still not compared to the much that the government can do in regarding to securing the lives and property and the well-being of its citizens. It's still, well, that's why we have them in the first place. That is why they are in existence in the first place. So yes, if you know in the past you've had any surgery, and
all of a sudden
in that clinic you're hearing one or two things about it, go and check. The earlier the better, because if this woman knew she was on one kidney, because we can actually live, she would have done, you would have, there would be a complete lifestyle change in what you eat, in your medication and all of that, and you would definitely be able to live much longer, because people have survived with one. And so just help yourself a little bit before we eventually get a government that will want to really do the job.
Honestly, we look forward to seeing a government that care about its citizens by doing all that is needed. We have a writer following that story that says about 25 million Nigerians are presently living with a disease. That's talking about kidney disease, as we're having the ASPTPAN give recipe on prevention, and I think everybody should look up that recipe on the front page and on page 8. We can produce 100,000 metric tons of rice a day. This is coming from Niger Millers, more detailed on page 18. NCAA warned private jet owners against commercial operations. Also, downside of the paper, Senate its own report exposing fraud in refineries rehabilitation. More detail can be found on page 6. Well, we hope that beyond just disowning that report, there should be a probe into that, so that those who are behind the fraud can be brought to book. We have a picture story on the front page where we can see the vice president with the former minister of information and others. You can grab the paper and see what that presidential visit in the villa was all about, and that's all on the Blueprint newspaper.
On Leadership newspaper, Yaradua emerges chairman Northern Senators Forum. You can find details on page 7. And on insecurity, Northern governors meet with NSA and service chiefs. The big story: amid budget controversy, Akpabio's constituency gets 21 billion naira project. figures accounts for projects in only 2 ministries. You can find details on page 4. And we have a little information here concerning the 2024 budget that says 2.5 billion naira budgeted for deep freezers, generators, and other items as empowerment of women in Akwa Ibom Northwest Senatorial Zone, comprising 10 local governments to boost their daily earnings. That is a breakdown of what this 21 billion naira project that Apabio's constituency got. And then it said, call for Apabio's resignation morally reprehensible, coming from Senate. Scrap constituency project if there won't be legal framework, coming from CSOs. Allegation of padded budget must be investigated. This is Atiku insisting. Still on the paper, student loan bill passes second reading in Senate and House. And at the downside of the paper, no timely report on Kaduna, Sokoto, Borno abductions. This is coming from the Defense Headquarters. And you can find details on page 26. And that's all the news on Leadership Friday edition.
Richard, I'll not blame civil organizations for saying they should scrap the constituencies project, because you know to go back to some of these constituencies and then let the senator show some of the projects that you actually did. You cannot keep collecting money, deceiving the Senate or deceiving yourself and say that you're actually having a project. And then let's go down to your constituency and we cannot say any project for you. Some people, the only project there is one borehole. For the past 8 years or 17 years, you have been the senator. Just one borehole in just maybe an area close to your place.
Or a few LEA classes, and that's it.
So I would really blame the civil organization for saying maybe that should be scrapped. If you will not do what is expected, you keep enriching yourself at the detriment of an entire constituency. It's really not right. I just hope that our senators will wake up and do right by their people. Because one thing I know for sure, they will stand on their toe and refuse this thing to be scrapped. But then if you do not want it to be scrapped, please do right by your people. Let us see projects. Let us see roads. Let us see bridges. Let us see street lights. Let us see something that Nigerians can say, you know what, yes, this senator, while he was the senator, he did something. So you cannot just go over there and you are quiet, you don't speak anything for a constituency. All you are canvassing for is your own allowances. And even when you collect some of this money that are meant for the project, you pocket it and you don't do anything.
Exactly.
So we hope they will do right by us.
Primary health cares are just there, and when they're supposed to be the intermediate contact for people with health care, it's supposed to be up to standard. We're seeing nothing about that. We see virtually nothing happening. And then there's something hilarious here concerning the breakdown. Say 2.5 billion naira budgeted for deep freezers and generators
and other items.
Deep freezers and generators don't go hand in hand. It's either they have electricity and you are giving them deep freezers, or they don't have electricity and you are giving them generators.
So where will they buy the fuel?
Exactly. What empowerment is this? It shows that they don't have electricity, but you want to give them deep freezers. Is it with the generators that they will power the deep freezers? We know that depending on the deep freezers, not all generators can really power deep freezers, and for how long? And we just keep seeing wastage of money, and the real thing that brings development is being ignored. The real thing that these people in this constituency need is probably not being, they probably don't have electricity, that's why they are being given generator, but you want to give them deep freezer. What do you want? What empowerment is deep freezer? I'm not saying they don't need it,
maybe for the market women who are into selling of life, maybe all these frozen foods, they need a deep freezer.
How many sell it? This is what I keep saying. When we know the problem and we keep beating around the bush, we don't grow, we don't develop, we don't move. There's no movement, there's no progress. And we keep seeing that over and over. There'll just be a call of like 20 women, you give them deep freezers and then you move. But how much is being allocated to you for your constituency compared to what you do, compared to the work you're doing? The healthcare is dying. Education is dying. Security, these are all the things you're supposed to give access to your people. Water is a problem. Electricity is a problem. And yet you're giving them deep freezer and generator when you're supposed to make better things available for them. So I agree with the CSOs, like you wouldn't agree less. There should be a legal framework for what should be done with these constituencies, and they just can't be giving people money at the detriment of how they feel like spending it.
The money.
It's just a recipe for no growth, and we can see it that there haven't been growth so far by doing things that way.
Well, we just look forward to seeing better steps from them. Well, before we move further to other paper, we'd love to take a break at this moment. Love to hear your own views concerning the 1 billion naira that doctors are asking to release the over 200 students. And then also we're seeing that Mile Kyari has promised that in the next 2 weeks, the Port Harcourt refinery will start production. So we hope that it doesn't exceed that. And then we're seeing that the student loan have passed second reading. So we're looking forward to seeing what will be the next outcome concerning that. Please stay tuned with us. We'll be right back after this time out.
Make your everyday informative, make your everyday count. Know your world, daily affairs, national and international, with authentic news events as they unfold on Global News and Zuma Nigeria, Monday to Friday at 1 p.m.
Welcome back. It's still the dailies. We have been looking at a number of stories on the paper, ranging from that of the talking about security, where we're seeing that the terrorists asking for 1 billion naira to release a student, and then also seeing the student loan, which has passed the second reading, and then hopefully in the next 2 weeks we should be seeing the Port Harcourt refinery should start production. These are many of the stories that what we have been looking at on the paper. I still have Rachel with me. Thank you, Rachel.
You're welcome, sir.
All right, and I'm Stella Elisha. Well, let's take a look at this day newspaper. NNPC vows to end fuel importation in 2024 as the Port Harcourt refinery begins production in 2 weeks. Senate says no fraud uncovered yet in the probe. More detail of that can be found on the front page and on page 5. Ninges alleges plot to arrest him as constituents seek reversal of suspension. You can find more detail of that on page 34. Also, we have NSA Service Chief Northern Governors meet behind closed door over the rising insecurity, with the Rider Defense Headquarters confirmed support for foreign nations. First Lady seeks stiffer penalty for the kidnappers, and then bandit demand $620,000 to release hostages. Telco submarine operations confirm major cut on subsea cable in the Red Sea. We have customers experience major disruption in Nigeria, Ghana, South Africa, Liberia, Senegal, and Cote d'Ivoire. NCC Telco says no cause for alarm as investigation and restoration is ongoing, and we look forward that all of that will be resolved soon. After deliberation on the Student Loan Act, we can see some of the senators together with the Senate President, and that's all on this day newspaper.
On the Vanguard newspaper, high interest rate risks aversion drive pension funds to federal government securities. Damage undersea cable disrupt internet services in Nigeria and African countries. Tinubu to governors, it's time for governance. Let's set aside political differences. Port Harcourt refinery will deliver petrol in 2 weeks, coming from Kiabi. The big story on the paper, 287 Kaduna students. Abductors demand 1 billion naira vow to kill victims in 20 days. Military vows to rescue school children, says abduction succeeded because the military was not notified on time. Okay, you can find details on page 5. I'm wondering who is supposed to notify the military that school students are supposed to be abducted. Well, I believe that that's the question the army should answer us. Who is responsible for notifying you that there's going to be a kidnapping? Note school children taken to terrain difficult to access. Explains reason for upsurge in mass abduction. NSCDC working with others to secure release of Kaduna students, coming from the CG. FCT to use drones to track kidnappers, coming from Wike. 19 northern governors, NSA service chiefs meet on possible review of security architecture. In Benue State, armed herdsmen kill 147 in 2 months. This is coming from Ethnic Leaders Chair. 50 taxes will be reduced to single digit in Lagos, coming from the LIRS Chair. You can find details on page 4. Teachers' welfare packages, government requires 345 billion naira to pay monthly salaries. Alleged 3.7 trillion naira budget padding, Atiku joins fray, demands probe. We have a column on page 17 by Awela Kemfa, and then sports column on page 30. Targets for Super Eagles is to win World Cup. Opala insists, and that's all the news on Vanguard newspaper.
Richard, you asked a question when you're reading the big story, whose responsibility is it to notify the military that an abduction is going to happen? And I remember times with that number when we do have some of these terrorists writing letters to the community, and then the community will notify the police, and the police will not do anything about it.
Yeah.
And then later on, where we see that an abduction has taken place, you are calling the CP and he's not picking, or you are actually trying to get them, and then their van is not there until operation is done, and then they start making this siren noise, and then coming as if I do not know what they intend to do after all has been achieved eventually. So this is really a question we need them to come out and tell us who is to notify you. Are you not supposed to be working? You made mention, I think it was on Nigeria Now, where you said that they are static. That is the problem. You are supposed to be on patrol 24/7, checking what is happening. Go down. Right now, we're seeing here that they're saying that where these children are taking is a terrain that is difficult to access. Where? How did these terrorists get to that place?
How did they access it?
And then you are unable to get there. And you remember, Rachel, we raised the question that some of these pathways, you know you're supposed to fix the routes. Now it still goes back to our senators. Our constituency money that was given to you. You are meant to fix the route, but you will not. There was a time we were watching when one of the governors in the eastern part made it to a village, and they said that was the first time a governor is going to that place. Richard, he could not even access that village on car. He had to use a bike. Why? Because there was no road to that village. How were you expecting these villagers initially to be able to run
a bridge?
So that is something that I really think that our leaders need to wake up, because whether we like it or not, some of the things that are happening are interwoven. Whether you like it or not, development is not far-fetched from insecurity. If you had developed some of this, we will not be facing what we are facing presently in the 21st century, when a number of people that are doing things better, we're still backward. So just like you raised the question, we hope to get answers from our security agency. Ribad will need to come out and tell us what is happening. I remember when he said they have overcome insecurity. So Ribad, what is happening?
What is happening?
Come and answer Nigerians what is happening. And I'm hoping that we'll get a valid answer coming from our leaders, because they really owe Nigerians, you know, an answer, because you vowed to do your job, and we wonder what is happening that you are not doing as expected.
And just as you drew to the attention the fact that they said inaccessible terrain, and you wonder, how did they access it? Are you not trained to be able to access things like that? And this is literally our military sounding very incompetent. Should that be? Should you even say that is inaccessible? How did they access? Are you not trained to be able to enter whatever hole and come out and get people out and all of that? And for you to sit down and feel like it's concrete, for you to say that where they are is not easily accessible, it shows your incompetency. And then it's really sad that we would have our force agency saying things like that. Wake up and do your work. You are employed to do it, you are paid to do it, and above all, you have taken an oath to protect lives and property. So do the needful, and let's see these children back, because whether we like it or not, some of them may lose their life. It's taking long. I don't think these people will happily feed 287 people. On what basis? They are not.
More.
They are hungry. These pupils are hungry. We know. We don't have to be there for us to say maybe they are in a hard situation or condition. It's not favorable for them. These children are probably not having sleepless nights. They are hungry, dehydrated, they are sick, not homesick, sick, because something is wrong with them and all of that. So let the needful be done quickly. We don't want to hear whether the place is accessible or not. If human beings were able to access it, then our military and our armed forces should be able to access it easier than these people that are not as trained as you are.
Let's take a look at the Nation newspaper. Still on the Port Harcourt refinery to resume in the next 2 weeks. More detail of that on page 7. Federal government insists these coals must recapitalize for efficiency. Government remodeling ports to rise the standards, says Oyetola. EFCC uncover how Red MD chief misappropriate 124 billion naira. More detail on page 25. Labour plans showdown with states not paying wage award. Only 14 states complying. Rivers is paying 30,000, Kwara, Gombe 10,000. We saw the states as well yesterday on the front page of the paper. So for states who are yet to start that, please pay the wage award, especially for the months before we hear what April will be for everybody. House kick over NAFDAC ban on alcoholic drinks and sachet. We're still having the story coming up again. More detail of that on page 28. Federal government eases access to student loan in the new proposal. More detail can be found. We have a highlight concerning that deliberation, which you can take a closer look at. And we have the NSA service chief, not governor, strategize on security. More detail found. Downside of the paper: on the sea cable caught crippled internet service, ex or your lawmaker jailed for fraud. You can find that story on page 4 and on page 8. And that's all on the Nation newspaper.
On the Punch newspaper, Senate reviews 30 trillion naira loan document, summons CBN officials. Facebook, Netflix, Google, others pay 3.2 trillion naira tax. This is coming from the NBS. PH refinery gets 450,000 barrels crude, resumes operations April. And the big story is school attacks. Bandits demand 1 billion naira for 287 pupils. Issue March 27 as deadline. Kidnappers called on Tuesday, gave us 20 days to raise ransom, says community leader. Hostages held in difficult location, used as human shield to prevent bombardment, coming from the defense headquarters. Politics over. It's time for governance, Tinubu tells governors at Iftar. You can find details on page 22. Nigeria leads as ECOWAS members default on 150 judgments. Many injured, 18 arrested as youth attack Ogun Monarch. Omotekun heightened security in Osun boundary communities. And that's all the news on the Punch newspaper.
On the Metrics newspaper, Port Harcourt refinery will commence operation in 2 weeks' time, coming from Kiari. Still on the Metrics newspaper, here we are having student loan bill. Tinubu seek repeal reenactment to address challenges in the previous version, and the bill has passed the second reading in Senate. 3.7 trillion pardoning allegation crisis continues, which is the big story. Senate decries PDP call for Akpabio's resignation, says it is reprehensible. Nige not target. He was given ample opportunity to defend himself, but flooded coming from Senate. Yaradua emerges as the new chairman of Northern Senators Forum, vowed to promote Nigerians' interests first. And on the kidnapping, here we're having NSA, service chief and northern governors meet behind closed doors. On the sea cable damage caused internet outrage, forcing Nigeria telcos and banks hit. And on tax, Nigeria earns 2.33 trillion naira from VAT, CIT in the fourth quarter of 2024 coming from the MBS. Again here, we are having let's work together, headwinds almost over, President Tinubu tells governors. And we have the picture story here, partnering with expert intellectuals for Nigerians' progress. That was the meeting that held with the Vice President, the former Minister of Information and others, and that's all on the Metrics newspaper.
On New Telegraph, the big story, bandits won 287 Kaduna school children ransomed for 1 billion naira. Give 20 days ultimatum, claims victims move to Zamfara state. Military foreign partners working to free hostages nationwide. Northern governors condemns part of abductions. Enact stiffer laws against kidnappers. First Lady urges the National Assembly. Undersea cable damage disrupts telcos and banks transaction. CBN bars banks from paying dividends with FX revaluation gains. And Niger border reopening, immigration boss directs prompt and strict compliance. Yar'Adua replaces Ningi as Northern Senators Forum chair. Expect reforms with ongoing 1999 constitution review, Abbas tell EU. Nigeria will have improved power services within 6 months. This is an assurance coming from Adelabu. You can find details on page 25. On welfare, retired soldiers lament neglect. Exam season, Nigerians slam EFCC for raiding UNN off-campus hostels. You can find details on page 7. Still on New Telegraph, coming from Bagudu, National Assembly top 2024 appropriation with 1.2 trillion naira, says it's within its democratic right, as Atiku demands probe of padded budget allegation. Broadband, Tinubu seeks tax alignment to facilitate investment expansion. We have a study coming from experts, or not a study, just a statement coming from experts saying vaccinations could curb high typhoid burden in Nigeria and others. You can find details on page 26, and that's all the news on New Telegraph newspaper.
On Nigerian News Direct, housing deficit, we are cutting down on expenses to provide affordable housing to Nigerians, coming from the FHA-MD. And the aftermath of border G explosion, we spent over 160 million naira providing accommodation and security for victims. This is coming from the Oyo government. Power Minister calls for capital punishment for vandals. More details found in the paper. EFCC sue Yahaya Bello, nephew and others for alleged 84 billion naira money laundering. The big story for Nigerian News Direct says the undersea cable cord cripples bank digital channels and business operations. CBN bars bank from utilizing forex gain to cover operational expenses and pay dividends, and that's all on Nigerian News Direct.
On Nature News, the big story, 5 billion hectares of shade trees grown in Nigeria. You can find details on page 3. 2024 farming season, Shetima launches agri-scheme. Farmers get tractors and fertilizers. And the Lagos state government moves to seize styrofoam in supermarkets and others. Taraba government partner federal government to curb carbon emission. Flooding, Yenogwa residents call for urgent dredging of Epi Creek. You can find details on page 7. Federal government reiterates commitment to food security. Kamik supports Oyo State's move to ban styrofoam usage. We have a column on nature care unveiling the hidden treasures of mango leaves. Details can be found on page 15. A nature fact that says, is the moon and the sun same size? If you want to know, details can be found on page 13. At the downside of the paper, Hani secures prime sponsorship as Ryan Garcia criticizes move. You can find details on page 21, and that's all the news on Nature News.
On Business Day newspaper, here we're seeing restaurants are boasting about sales to 4-year high amid the rising prices. Of course, they have doubled the prices of their food, so definitely They will be having some profit over there. You can find more detail of that. Also, we have private developer seek road in Lagos State rent to own initiative. Undersea cable cord affect internet service in Nigeria and other countries. More detail found on page 31, and that's all on Business Day newspaper.
On Punch Sport Extra, the big story, Michael Insen exclusive. African countries prefer foreign and older coaches. Most of these foreign coaches are at the end of their careers and looking to collect a few last checks. My football coaching goal. Olise predicts dip in Eagles' fortune. Aimba will fight till end, coming from Finidi. And then we have cricket's golden girl Etim retires after Ghana heroics. Team Nigeria dropped to third position. This is on the African Games. And then we have Desert Fires blanks in Gerald's Ousters. This is Rangers versus Benfica, where we are seeing a 3-2 win. It is on aggregate. Galatasaray renew in the bid. Chelsea to earn mega bonus from Musiala sale. PSG ponder Rashford Diaz moves. Details can be found on page 4. De Bruyne out of Belgium's squad. And at the downside of the paper, we have Arsenal announced new white contract. Napoli keen on Florenzo stay. You can find details on page 6. And then we have Iguano needs checkups after Joshua's knockout. And that's all the news on Punch Sports Extra.
Well, that's how far we can go on the program this morning. Thank you, Rachel.
You're welcome, Sally.
And also, thank you to our viewers, thank you to our supporters, and everyone that made this program a success. Until we come next week, to have a blessed weekend ahead.